and thank you for joining us for this, our second market update via Zoom. It's interesting. I had never done this format before March 11th, and we all started sheltering in place, but it's definitely become a bigger part of our business life since then. And I think we're going to continue to find some efficiencies that it allows us. So those of us that are working with our agronomist, Gerardo Aldonate, will be working with him on this round of consults via Zoom. Instead of him getting on a plane to come visit us, we decided that it would be safer and more efficient to do it in this format. And the field reps are working on putting those together. And I imagine that as time goes on, we'll also look for some efficiencies with our food safety certifications as well. So last month, when we all got together, it was a very crowded U.S. avocado market. We had 11 days of inventory, which causes a weak market, and there were 9 different types of avocados vying for attention in the marketplace. There were 5 primary ones, which were California Hass, California Lamb Hass, Mexican Old Crop, Mexican Flor Loca, and Peruvian avocados. Those are the big 5. And then, just in case that wasn't enough, there was also a little bit of noise being made from Colombia, Florida, Dominican Republic, etc. And so what we said on the July call was that, look, this is a very crowded market at the moment, but as we get past August 15th, we should see a little bit less complexity in the market. So we know that there would be less fruit coming up from Peru. We knew that there would be no old crop anymore out of Mexico by the second half of August, and that the California bean count would reduce primarily out of the southern growing districts of Temecula, Fallbrook, and Escondido. And all of that is starting to come to pass. And that had started what appeared to be a very delicate recovery starting about 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, we saw this 20% reduction in the California daily harvest rate. We got past the peak arrivals from Peru, and Mexico started feeling a little bit more demand from the U.S. market for Mexican fruit because of that. And so what's natural is if you feel more demand, you ask for a little bit more money, especially in those early days when the Flor Loca is just starting. They're doing dry matter testing, and you know that the number of growers that have Flor Loca with sufficient dry matter to harvest is limited. They could ask for more money. But it was a very delicate recovery, because at the same time they were asking for more money, they also shipped more fruit. So from 11 days of inventory back when we met about in early July, that went down to 9 days of inventory, all told, all countries of origin. And that added a little bit of optimism, served as kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. But then when Mexico ratcheted up their volume at slightly higher prices, $3 to $4 per lug, that slowed down the recovery. So it's very, very delicate. But we do believe we do believe it will continue, but with knowing full well that there continue to be about 80 million pounds of inventory. We're going to have in excess of 10 million pounds arriving from Peru for another couple of weeks, and knowing that Mexico does have 30% more Flor Loca than they did last year, we could easily go back to 11 days of inventory if too much fruit comes in at once. So there are signs of optimism, but it is a delicate optimism. And so what are we seeing today? We are seeing that California, let's start with California. The southern growing districts of Temecula, Fallbrook, and Escondido, the bean counts from those areas is down about 50% versus where it was when we met a month ago. So a month ago, they were picking about 1,100 bins per day. Today, they picked about 550. So that is down. The north is picked up a little bit, but not enough to cover the decrease from the south. So overall, the California bean counts are down about 20%. That was expected, and that has come to fruition. So today, the southern portion of that daily bean count has reduced from about 45% a month ago to 30% today. And if they're picking 550 bins per day this week, it's not going to be that high next week. They are decreasing, and in another couple of weeks, there'll be even less of a participation in the market than they are today. Whenever I say that, it reminds me of a cliche. There was a grower in Goleta that used to have a sign up in his office that said 2 weeks left in the South. And he kept it up year round because, every year around April or May, Southern handlers would start coming up to Santa Barbara saying, hey, we got 2 weeks left in the South. We're starting to look for fruit. And lo and behold, every year, in July, the southern portion of the daily bean count was still higher than the northern portion. So he kept that 2 weeks left in the South sign up on a year-round basis in his office. But I do feel that, we do know that in 2 weeks, the southern portion of the bean count will, if it's 30% today, it'll be less than that moving forward. Let's move on to Peru. Peru peaked. Their arrivals peaked from about June 20th to July 15th, más o menos. They peaked in the 17 to 18 million pound range. Last week, they were down to 13. They'll probably have one more week in the double-digit range before they're below that. So, and they're on a true bell curve. So every week is going to be 10 to 15% less fruit coming out of Peru. The other news coming out of Peru is that they're going to come in about 10% under their early season projections. They were originally projecting about 4,400 containers, and they're going to come in, it looks like at this time, around 4,000. So what happened? We had a couple of their late season growers, traditional late season growers, did not have the set that they originally thought. And the other one is they ended up diverting more fruit to other destinations. So about 300 to 350 of the containers that they are not shipping to the United States ended up going to other destinations in South America, primarily the southern cone of Chile and Argentina, and then to Asia. Asia, they shipped a lot more fruit to Asia this year than they had originally projected. Let's move on to Mexico. In Mexico, here we are on August 5th, and the transition from old crop to new crop is basically complete. There's a few guys still shipping a little bit of old crop, but basically, if you're buying Mexican avocados today, 90% of the fruit is going to be Flor Loca. So that transition is complete, that's taken some of the complexity of or noise in the market away. So it's one product instead of two. So that brings us to three. If we had 5 principal sources of avocados a month ago, California Hass, California Lambs, Mexican old crop, Mexican new crop, and Peru, 3 of those 5 have seen a significant reduction. The California bean count is down 20%. The Peruvian arrivals will continue to decrease by 10 to 15% per week, and the Mexican old crop is essentially gone from the marketplace. Now, Mexico will increase its volumes, probably not enough to completely fill the gap that Peru and California leave as they recede from the marketplace. But even if they were to, even if the arrival volumes do not go down a lot, the complexity of those volumes does go down. So you go where Mexico was only 40% of the arrivals last month, they are 60% today, and they'll probably be 70% or more by the end of the month. So you take away some of that noise, and instead of having 9 options for avocados, you're gonna go back to having only 2 or 3 principal options for avocados, and taking away that complexity should add a little bit more stability to the market. So where do we see some opportunities arriving? Where are they going to appear first? They're going to appear first, and we're already starting to see it. If you're monitoring the fresh tracks, we're seeing it first on the large fruit and on the second grade fruit. Why is that? It is because as Mexico transitioned from the old crop to the new crop, the new crop has less Cat 2 fruit and less large fruit, which is logical. The old crop had been on the tree for 15 or 16 or 17 months. That's a lot of opportunity for wind scar and sunburn, and all that kind of stuff. So the Flor Loca has been on the tree for 7 months. So it's just, you haven't had that opportunity. It's just a lot prettier of a product. So you do not have the high percentage of Cat 2s that you had before. It's also not been on the tree long enough to really size. So the 32s, 36s, and 40s are much shorter coming out of the Flor Loca than they were coming out of the old crop. So that's where we're going to see the market rebound first. I want to talk a little bit about organic fruit and lamb Hass for those of you that are on this call that have either of those 2 categories of fruit. The organic fruit just has fared the best, I would say, through this whole summertime. If you look at the fresh tracks right now, it's, depending on the size, getting anywhere from a 40 to 60 cent premium over the Hass. And we're seeing less competition. So in July, when we had all this complexity in the marketplace, Mexico, who did not run out of old crop this year, did run out of old crop organic fruit. So you had less competition there. Peru shipped a fair amount of organics up here, but the profile of buyer for Peruvian organics does not necessarily compete directly with the profile of buyer for California organics. So the organic portion of the marketplace has been bright and should continue to get brighter. Why is that? We will have more as we get into the Flor Loca. There is definitely greater availability of organics out of Mexico, but that's countered by less organics coming out of California. And that's a difference that we have within our state on between the North and the South. So we had the South used to be 60% of the volume, and now that's transitioned where the North year to date this year is 56% of the HAS. This
Hey, Giovanni, if you can hear us, we lost your audio.
Sorry about that, Steve. I declined a call that came in. I'm doing this on my phone. Where did you lose me?
Maybe 2 sentences ago. That's it.
Okay, so season to date, the South, the North has been the bigger portion of the fruit with 56% of the HAS, but the South still remains dominant in the organic sector. So year to date for 2020, the South is represented 71% of the organic fruit that came in. So as the Southern growing districts reduce their participation in the California harvest, which I talked about when I opened this presentation, the availability of California organics is declining with that. So if you have, as we finish out the California season, the organic category should continue to be attractive and probably become a little bit more attractive as the weeks go on. I want to talk a little bit about lamb Hass as well. Lamb Hass was originally very attractive to a lot of growers because of its late season characteristics. So it is a true summer variety. You cannot pick it. It does not have sufficient dry matter before June. And a lot of the excitement about the lamb when it was originally developed came out of the South because growers there were seeing it as a way for them to extend their season later into the summer and into the fall, and trying to catch what had historically been a bit of a fall market rise at the end of the California season. Now the market has evolved since then, and the fall in several years has been less attractive than it used to be. So we've seen the lamb Hass harvest move closer and closer to the release dates. This year is a little bit different, and so we've been talking to the lamb growers that we work with about that there could potentially be a window a little bit later in the season, and we're now approaching that. We're now in that window, or if we're not there today, we will be within a week or two. And what is that? It's part of the Mexico transition. So if Mexico in the Flor Loca is short on large fruit, there is interest from a lot of those buyers in, hey, what are my options out of California? If I can't get my 40s and 36s from Mexico, what can we do out of California? So we started quoting the lambs about a week or two ago, and we'll continue that. It's going to be very important with all three of these categories, but even more so with the lambs, to really coordinate the harvest with the field team, because it's what we like to do is on these niche varieties is have them come in with a critical mass for coordinated programs with the buyers. So it's easier for us to have a steady amount of bins per week for 5 or 6 weeks than it is to have wide swings in, a lot of bins come in 1 week, then no bins, then again. So the coordination is important on all three of these categories as we finish out the Hass season over the next 8 or 10 weeks, and even more so in coordinating a steady flow of the organics and the lambs. So in summary, we're in a less crowded market than we were in July, but the market improvement is delicate at best, and Mexico learned that a little bit over the last 2 weeks as they tried to raise prices and volume at the same time, and that didn't work very well. And there is still a danger zone that if both countries overpicked, because of a perception of a market peak, that we could go back to 10 or 11 days of inventory, which would not be healthy for any of us. So again, it's a delicate recovery, but it looks like it will be a recovery. There's opportunities that are starting to appear. They're appearing first on category 2 fruit and large sizes. Organics have been a bright spot throughout the season and will continue to do so, especially as the South finishes. And lambs are coming into a nice little window here at the end of August, 1st of September, especially with opportunities on lambs. And coordination with the field team is important on all of these issues as we finish the 2020 season over the next 8 or 10 weeks. With that, I think if we could do what we did last time and coordinate any questions, maybe through Giuseppe, I'd be happy to answer any questions that we have.
Say good morning. Last time we used the chat function to type the questions in. I can, if there are any, please feel free to do so. I can read them off, and Giovanni and I can try to answer them for you. Looks like we have a question that is coming from Ivor. He's asking, why did Peru not gain as much traction this year, Giovanni?
That's a very good question, and a question that the Peruvians are always scratching their head on. Why, they've been here now for 8 seasons. Why are they still kind of viewed as a third option? Last year was less so. Last year, Mexico did run out of old crop in early May, and the price spiked, and every avocado that arrived was a good avocado. But I think it's important to remember that just the real dominance that Mexico has in the U.S. marketplace. We don't feel it as much in California because we're growers and we deal with fruit, and we're walking around California avocado farms all day long. But when you look at the numbers, 85% of the avocados sold today in the United States are coming from Mexico. And that's a huge share of market for any single source to have. And so, and it goes beyond the numbers. That goes to the sales relationships and the labels and a lot of the other intangibles that if somebody's in Chicago or Wisconsin or Minnesota and they're buying from a source, their avocados all year round, they're not necessarily going to change that source for 8 or 10 weeks in the summertime. So as long as Mexico has enough fruit, it's hard for another country of origin to come in for a short, number of weeks and displace that primary source when there's enough fruit. So that's that's one of that to me, that's one of the big reasons why Peru still kind of struggles, and they can't break out of their window. So that's another challenge of Peru, is that, you know, one of the blessings of avocados is in Mexico, California, or Chile, is if you don't like the market today, Hass avocados, you can wait 6 weeks. And if you don't like the market in 6 weeks, you can wait another 6 weeks. Peru doesn't have that luxury. They have a 15-week window, and they have to pick it in that 15 weeks. We learned this year, they could not extend it with the new plantings in Olmos. They're running out of fruit in the traditional late growing areas. So they don't have the luxury to slow down the harvest if they don't like the market. And that also kind of puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage. I think you're on mute, Giuseppe.
Giovanni, how much of Peru's fruit comes to the U.S.?
It was supposed to be about 25%. I think it's going to be less than that this year because of those 400 containers that got diverted between the Southern Cone and Asia. So it's somewhere just south of 25%. The vast majority of the fruit goes to Europe, where Peru is the dominant supply. Pardon me. Not quite as dominant as Mexico is in the United States, but they're probably 40% of the European supply, and the next closest competitor would be about 25%. And then the U.S. is a close second, and then Asia and other Latin American destinations, they're tied for third.
Thank you. So currently there's no additional questions there. Any?
Should we go to, if anybody didn't have the chat function, do we want to take a couple audibly?
That works.
So if you have a question,
I think everybody's on mute right now. So if there are any questions, I think we could either unmute, or feel free to unmute, or I think there's also a raise hand button we could try to use. Looks like we got a quiet crowd of growers. Okay, hold on one second. I see Andy has a question. Let me see if I could help unmute him, or if JR or Andy can help unmute. Can't hear you yet.
How about now?
There we go.
Okay.
Good morning, Andy.
Morning. Just a question about the gem fruit. Can you give us a update, Giuseppe, on or Giovanni, on the gems, and how much in the way of volume index is processing in gems at this point, and maybe next year estimate?
Sure, that's a great question. And I touched on it a little bit at the previous meeting, because we were finishing up the gem season at that point, but I'd be happy to revisit that. So our entire economy has been hit by COVID, and the gems were a bigger victim of that than the Hass was. So let me go back a little bit. The gem index Belize is a fantastic avocado variety, and we've been around for the introduction of the great new thing several times. So I've got a Gwen avocado on the desk in the other room that is that I'm planning on having for lunch today. We've been through the Pinkertons, we've been through the Lamb House, and they all kind of had a lot of promising attributes, but over time became less competitive in the marketplace and gave out to Hass. And the Hass is a great avocado, and we know that because it rose to become the #1 avocado not once but twice. It did it once in the 1970s in California, and then it did it again completely independently in Mexico, but in both places beating out dozens and scores of other varieties. So we know that the Hass is hard to beat because it rose to the top not once but twice. So the gems, the idea on our rollout is that it's got more and better positive attributes than those other 3 varieties that I mentioned. And so we've been big promoters of it in the marketplace. This year, we even rolled out a new PLU for it to really highlight. And the idea is to add to the avocado real estate in the produce section. So we didn't want to cannibalize Hass sales with gem sales. We wanted to add another area to sell avocados in the produce section. So you might have a 4th display. If you already have a display of large fruit at one price and organic fruit at another price and small fruit at a 3rd price, we wanted you to walk into your local realtor or your local retailer, and they would have a 4th display of avocados with gems, just like you see today with apples. You don't just see the red delicious anymore. You see the ambrosias and the Fuji's and the galas, all at different prices, all at higher prices than the old standard. And that was the idea. That's kind of the vision on what we would like to maybe see with the gem. And over the last couple of years, this is our 3rd or 4th season with the gem as a standalone variety. We've had some decent feedback on it from the retailers, and we've hired bloggers and we sent out samples and we put a tremendous amount of effort on it. This year, when COVID hit, it hit right at about the time that we were, in March, when we were getting ramped up for the gem season. And a couple of retailers that had worked with us in the past said, look, guys, I love what you're doing. I love this variety. I believe in it, but man, I'm up to my eyeballs right now. I got to figure out if I'm going to stay open. If I stay open, I've got to figure out how I'm going to protect my employees and keep them safe. We've got to figure out how to protect my customers and keep them safe as they come in and get groceries. And I'm up to my eyeballs trying to figure out how to find enough beans, pasta, and toilet paper on the shelves. So they said, now is not the best time to add complexity with another avocado display. But with that said, we are still big believers in the gem. They are selling several hundred acres worth of trees per year, and we're keeping a pretty close monitor on that. We're doing we've done gem specific meetings for the gem grower community, and we'll continue to do that and coordinate the harvest. This year was a difficult year for sure, especially when compared on a price per pound against the Hass for any given size, right? But for most of the pools, the average was between the gem was close to the average of the Hass return. It was different on given sizes, but because the gems were larger, it tended to be very close until the last couple of pools. And in the last couple of pools, those returns did erode. But we're believers in the long term on this. for a few reasons. One is productivity. That, you know, with Hass, if California is an average of 7,000 pounds per acre, Index is a big believer that, you know, if that's your average in alternate bearing, that means your off year is 3,000 pounds an acre, and that doesn't pay the bills anymore. And that's why we're doing the, you know, so we're big believers in, you know, how do we increase productivity out of California? That's why we do the seminars. That's why we have Gerardo rather, and that's why, and we think that the gem can be a real important part in increasing California's productivity per acre. Another reason is the genetic diversity, that we all know that the Hass is more susceptible to some pests like skirtle-thrips or persaemite than other varieties. And, you know, I'm a little bit worried about losing genetic diversity if we have a more severe pest or disease come in that is specific to Hass. And the third one I like to remind everybody is that, you know, Rudolph Hass patented his tree in 1935, and it really did not become the industry leader until the 1970s. So it didn't happen overnight. So we're going to continue to put a lot of effort into the gem avocado.
Okay,
Giovanni,
thank you.
I would add to that that currently California is the only producer that's allowed to provide gems into the U.S. market. To my knowledge, Peru, Chile, Mexico, if they grow them, they can't send them here based on their marketing orders. Is that correct?
The Chileans can ship non-Hass, but you're absolutely right, Giuseppe, and that's a point I had forgotten to highlight, is that the fourth reason I really like the gem is a point of differentiation with California. So on Hass, we're competing against the offshore suppliers, Hass versus Hass versus Hass. And in my mind, because the protocols for those countries are written for Hass only. And so if they want to export something that is not a Hass, that's automatically going to be 5 years of research they have to do, at least. So that's another reason I think that the gem can allow us to differentiate our California product in just one additional manner.
And then just to tie back around to another part of Andy's question, I believe Index handled a little over 1.1 million pounds of gems this year, Andy, and the industry, based on AMRIC, is reporting slightly over 1.4 million pounds.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Giovanni, we have another question. How much fruit is estimated to be remaining in California?
I think we're down to about 75 million pounds. I think I touched on that during the presentation. And, you know, so that would be, if it's 10 weeks, that's gonna be about, you know, that would be 7 or 8 million pounds per week. Of course, there's going to be a bell curve component. It feels to me like we're going to be pretty steady at this 8 to 9 million pounds for August. And then as we get into September, we'll see that tapering in a bell curve type of way. But it's still a lot of fruit. And that's what I wanted to emphasize in that delicate portion of the market recovery, is if the market were to have gone up very quickly, and then, you know, fruit comes out of the woodwork from Mexico and California as a reaction to that, it could set us in for some significant volatility, which is not healthy for any of us. So that's I think that what we talked about on the previous call about, you know, developing a harvest strategy where you have an end date where you want to be finished by, you know, the amount of fruit that is on the trees, and kind of pick on a weekly basis toward getting that volume off by that end date, I think is the healthiest strategy for finishing out the season.
Thank you. Any other questions this morning?
Okay, well, if not, I want to thank everybody for participating. And if you have any questions, comments, observations, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Steve, or the field reps. We're always happy to take calls from the growers. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.